Yeah, now it's on.
Yes.
Edward. Kelly. So let's go ahead and start the roll.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Freeman.
Here.
Mr. Kemp.
Here. All right, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see, we're gonna let Michelle do it one more time. So you can get it right, because last time you dropped the ball, so let's do it.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Here you go, sir. Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes. Debbie?
motion for approval of the regular meeting minutes of June 12th and the work session on June 17th.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do the roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Kemp.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, did you say something? I thought you said something.
No.
Okay, so next we have a public presentations. We're up to public presentations and actions. This is going to be a follow-up discussion regarding recommendations for the facilities and analysis work session on June the 17th. We have a financial advisor, bond legal counsel, and primary engineer from Branstetter Carroll. And they are here to give us a presentation on what we discussed on the 17th. So, Tim, are you?
I can kick it off.
All right,
Turn it over.
Kick away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is in our continuing process, looking at our facilities, looking at the analysis that was completed and just wrapped up. I think you all have a copy of the final report at this point, as well as our steering committee. We've had 2 work sessions on this. One was about 3 weeks ago, and the board at that time decided that it was an opportune time for us to start going in a particular direction on the facilities and what we're going to do next, based on the recommendations in the facility analysis and the steering committee. So tonight we have Joe Lakofka with Ross Sinclair, and his team is here to talk a bit about financing and how it works, particularly bond issuing in Ohio and how that will work, that process would work here. After he's completed, Ben Brandstetter is here with Brandstetter Carroll, and they're going to talk a bit about the process when we actually move, if we move, the board decides to move forward with some sort of building program, how that would work and the different ways that we could go about that. So with that, I want to turn it over first to Joe Lakofka and his staff to talk about that. We also have bond counsel here as well.
Good evening. Good to see you all. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak tonight. I know I've met some of you in advance. I've had the pleasure of working with Tim off and on for, I don't want to say how long, but
I had hair.
yeah, 30 years ago. I'm Joe Lakofka with RSA Advisors, technically what used to be the Ross Sinclair out of Cincinnati, Ohio. With me tonight is Brian Skinner, my partner, and also presenting tonight will be Donnie Warner from Frost Brown Todd, bond counsel out of Cincinnati, Ohio. So we've got a presentation put together for you. We're going to walk through how we might get this financing done, and should you decide to move forward, at least you'll have some insight on how that works. I'm going to turn it over to Brian and Donnie and let you walk through this. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Donnie Warner, partner at Frost Brown Todd in our public finance department. Happy to be here this evening and walk through the bond proposal here and the financing proposal and just give you a sense of the overall process of issuing the proposed bonds to finance these facilities. And so we're on our second slide here. This is basically the process that would get us to issuing bonds if the trustees elected to do that in order to finance the facilities. And so we have 4 stages here in this process. The first is really where we are right now, which is structuring the issue, which is thinking about kind of capacity does the township have to issue this debt, preparing an analysis, a financial analysis of that, which Brian and Joe are doing and will present at the end of this presentation, and then making a recommendation as to the overall structure, based on the financial capacity of the township. From there, once all of those items are determined, we would go into the rating process, where Brian and Joe would work with the township and myself to present to the ratings agencies to establish a rating of the township based on its financials, based upon all of the capacity to issue the debt, and then prepare ultimately a rating presentation for those rating agencies. And once we had our rating, we would go to market and actually with an underwriter sell the bonds to the market, based on the underlying rating, get bids for those bonds, sell the bonds and have the proceeds ready to move forward with the project. And so that's really the last step there, which is execution. Selling the bonds, depositing the funds, finalizing the official statement, and moving forward with the project. And then once the bonds are issued, there is a disclosure process where the township would file annual disclosures so that the bondholders can be informed about the financial status of the township over time while the bonds were outstanding. But overall, that's a high-level view of the process that we'd be going through. And again, we're really at step 1 right now. Does anyone have questions about that process and those steps?
Nope.
So on the next slide, there is this sort of decision tree. At the top, we have 2 sort of options here in terms of how these bonds are issued. The first would be general obligation limited tax bonds. And that really means, the township operates within a 10 mil limit. And so the bonds will be payable from within the township's allocation of those 10 mils, within Claremont County. And so when bonds are issued within the 10 mil limit, they do not require a vote. They can be unvoted debt. And so that would be one option to proceed here. And we could later show to an analysis that there is capacity to issue bonds within that 10 mil limit. The alternative would be an unlimited general obligation, which would be a voted obligation. And essentially that's where the township would put a levy, an outside levy, outside the 10 mil allocation. It would go to a vote. And then each year that levy would be put in place to pay the debt service required on the bonds. So those are really the two options. And then the next slide walks through the mechanics of the debt limitations that the township has under the Ohio Revised Code and under section 505-262. And so generally the township's limit is 5% of the assessed value of the property in the township. And so that's approximately $32 million in terms of debt capacity for purposes of that limitation. And so again, that's just something to keep in mind, parameters within which the debt can be issued. And based on my understanding of the proposal, we're not approaching that limit here. And actually, because these bonds will be issued to finance facilities that are going to house fire equipment, those facilities are actually exempt from this $32 million limit. So these bonds would not count against that $32 million limit under the Ohio Revised Code. And that's really the third bullet point on this slide. These being securities issued for fire buildings and equipment. Any questions on that slide? And so the next slide really goes in more to this provision that permits the township to issue the bonds to finance the fire facility and the public safety facility. And again, there's the exemption from the debt limitation. So these will not count against that $32 million number. There are parameters as far as the interest rate and how that can be established. And that is, the interest is not to exceed the maximum average of annual interest as determined by the trustees. So ultimately, you would have the discretion to set that interest rate. And in cooperation with Joe and Brian, we could look at sort of what a market rate would be. And then in the legislation, provide that maximum rate so that when the bonds were sold, they could not be sold in excess of that rate. Sale would not move forward. And that would be in the legislation. And then additionally, we would pass legislation, a bond resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of the securities. And so this would be sort of the formal legislative process that would conclude from there. The statute also contemplates that the bonds will be sold on the open market. Typically, we see that an underwriter is engaged by the township, and then the underwriter goes to market the rating, the official statement, markets the bonds, and sells the bonds. And so that's typically how that statutory requirement is. And the next slide is a very preliminary assessment of that 10 mil limitation. And what you have to do is you need to take into consideration the overlapping subdivisions, taxing subdivisions within the township. And then you have to account for the existing debt that is outstanding for each of those subdivisions. And so that's what we've done here. And when you do that analysis, you look at the maximum principal amount that's payable in any given year, and the maximum amount of interest that's payable in any given year with respect to the bond issues that are outstanding. And then you look at the assessed value of the corresponding taxing jurisdiction, and you see what levy would be required in order to pay that debt service. So the crux of this slide is essentially, there is some debt outstanding in these overlapping subdivisions, but there's certainly capacity for the township to issue debt and be within the 10 mil limitation. The next slide goes back to this sort of fork in the road as far as voted or unvoted obligation, which provides an overview of the process for a voted obligation, how that's placed on the ballot, and then that, if it is placed on the ballot and is passed, the payment of debt charges is an authorized use of the funds that would be collected from any outside levy. So structurally, that's the part of the presentation that I had as far as laying out the legislative authority, providing some background on the parameters within which the bonds would be issued. I'm happy to answer any questions about sort of that groundwork. Otherwise, Brian has some presentation on the actual structuring of these bonds and options financially.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonny. Thank you, trustees. Again, Brian Skinner with RSA Advisors. Go over a little bit of a wall of numbers here for you. And again, these are all just estimates. These will be determined when we finally go to sell the bonds based on current market rates, with a little bit of a buffer to be conservative. If we sold them today, probably be a little bit lower than these interest rates, but just never know what's going to happen in the market. So we got two scenarios and then multiple options within those. And then as we get closer to determining what the township would like to do, we'll start narrowing these down and really nailing down exactly what we want, what we think the payments may be, what the township's comfortable, with an annual payment. Try not to be like, a used car salesman too much and back into a monthly payment, but we certainly can do that. Scenario A is a public safety building only, with an estimated cost of $12 million. So you'll see underneath that in the blue there, we've got three different term options, a 20, 25, and 30-year term. Again, if the payment you want is in between a 20 and 25 year, we can do a 23-year issue. These are just kind of starting points for us. Within each of those term options, we've got a $12 million option and a $10.5 million option. The reason there's a $1.5 million difference is there's currently about $1.5 million in that Walmart TIF fund. So we are contemplating whether or not you use those monies to offset construction or keep those back. So again, as we get through all this and work with Branstetter, we will nail down exactly how much you need for the project. So just an example, kind of look down there, average annual debt service on $12 million for 20 years, $884,000. And you kind of work across there, as you go across from 20 years to 25 to 30, see the annual payments go lower. Of course, your total debt service, next line down goes up for each just because you're keeping that outstanding longer and you're selling at a slightly higher interest rate. See, for a 20-year, we're estimating a 3.88% true interest cost as we analyze all the rates. And then 25-year would be 4.07, 30-year would be 4.25. We would propose selling fixed rate debt, so most townships do. After 7 or 8 years, we would make these what we say callable, meaning prepayable, or you could refinance it. So if at any point at that 7 to 8 years or beyond that, just like your home mortgage, we could go and refinance that, or say you had some extra money coming in, pay it down in any increments that you would like. Similarly, scenario B is the public safety building as well as the renovation of this existing township building with an estimated total project cost of $18 million. And same options down below, 18 million minus that 1.5 million from the Walmart TIF and options there. Again, this is just a rough starting point. Once we get through the ratings process, a little bit more, we get down the road closer to construction. You'll see more estimates from us. We'll work with you a little closer on nailing down where it is, let you know where the market is, give you updates along the way. Any questions on this slide? I know it's a big bunch of numbers here, but kind of wanted to put a little bit of ink on the paper so you know what we're talking about when you say $12 million.
No, we're good.
All right. The next slide gets even more boring, if you can imagine that. We're talking about the investment of the proceeds. Interest rates are a little higher than they were, say, in 2021. See it on the news. The Fed has not lowered rates for a little while. We kept thinking they would. No real indication that they're going to soon. But the one benefit of that is short-term interest rates. So once you borrow this money, say you borrow $12 million, you get that $12 million on day one. Say you will get a draw schedule from Branstetter, and it takes a year, 18 months, 2 years to build it. We'll structure a portfolio of securities that will earn, and at this time would earn more than that estimated, say 3.88%. There's something called SLUG, state local government securities, made just for this. We'd also bid out open market agencies to see if it made sense. So as you can see, a 1 year, this is essentially a treasury rate, is 4.98%. So you're actually able to invest these funds at higher than your bond yield. That creates something called arbitrage. Sounds like a scary word. So long as we meet all of the requirements on the following about 10 pages, which I will not bore you, go through all that. Basically, we want to spend that money within 2 years and you get to keep that excess interest. If you don't, you might have to rebate just the part over that 3.88% back to the IRS. So that's something we help you do, help you monitor and make sure that you're meeting all those spending requirements. With that, that's pretty much all we had, unless you have specific questions on the financing. Or if you would like me to go through the arbitrage, and if someone's watching online and you really want them to turn it off, I can keep reading.
I think that I heard Nick say he wanted you to go through the arbitrage.
Got it. All right. If you want to go to
Read my
sleep, call me
mind.
later. I'll read it to you over the phone.
You guys have any questions?
No, I'd like to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So generally, the purpose of the arbitrage rules are the federal government does not want you borrowing at tax exempt rates, which you would be borrowing at, say at that 3.88%, and then turning around and investing those funds at 5%, you know, taking advantage of the tax code, making that extra. However, they're okay with you doing that so long as you're doing it for a public reason, an actual reason you're building government building in this case. So definitely a qualifying purpose. In the past, issuers would do something maybe called tax anticipation of borrow money they'd say they might need and earn some arbitrage. So they got rid of that and put some of these in line. Example, very simple example, you issue $10 million at a tax exempt rate of 3%. We invest those tax exempt bonds at 5%, which is, you know, a taxable treasury bond. And that extra 2% would earn you $200,000 a year extra on that. So what we would do potentially, and we'd work with you on that, is we did a deal recently. It was 16 million, had an 18-month draw schedule. They earned $400,000 in interest. So we ended up borrowing $400,000 less. So that's how we use that to our advantage. We try to calculate how much you're going to use, and we can either borrow less, or if you guys think you may want to change something along the way, or you run into some sort of problem, so you underground gas tanks or something you didn't know about, that excess interest you can keep and use for things like that. So yet another decision, and we'll be asking you to make down the line. So going through here, yield restriction, we would do a yield restriction if we got a draw schedule back that say was longer than that 2 years, and the rate on your bonds was that 3.88%. Those state local government securities, those rates I showed you are the maximum rates. If we can ask and subscribe to those at any rate below that. So we would, if your bond yield is at 3.88%, we would invest the funds at 3.88%, so you didn't earn any excess interest on there at all. So that'd be a yield restriction, something you may have to do. We do that for current refundings. Again, this is something we, when I started my career back in 07 and 08, we worried about this. The past year and a half is when I've had to go back and relearn a lot of these. As you know, you haven't earned any money bank. Let's see. And again, so if those rules are not met, we would have to send the excess over to the IRS. There are certain anniversaries, a 5-year anniversary, where you'd be required to do an arbitrage calculation report. We can do an initial report for you just to prove that you've spent the money in the appropriate amount of time. But say the project gets stalled, which could happen in certain circumstances. It doesn't seem like it would here, but we have different ways of keeping track of that, and it is a record keeping thing. So whoever the paying agent bank is for the deal, once that is selected, we'll want to make sure we keep those monies separate and keep a good accounting of when those monies are spent. But again, that's something we can help you through. And so there are certain limitations. This is 3-year temporary period. If you were to borrow less than $10 million, we may be able to get you $5 million, a small issue exemption, but I don't think we're going to be in that situation here. The replacement proceeds I'm not very good at explaining it, so I won't really try, but that's mostly when we have to deal with refunding or something that's not a government purpose. There are certain funds that are not, this page is our arbitrage rebate exemptions. The one that we're gonna be shooting for is the 2-year expenditure exception. That's what most will operate under, and I believe we'll be able to meet that, possibly the 18-month, but those are all the same. If we use the 2-year, then we'll just need to keep records of how much we spent each 6 months. But again, a lot of a construction project like this will move pretty quickly. Knock on wood, shouldn't have to worry about something like that. You will not have a debt service fund, debt service reserve fund. You'll have a debt service fund. So when you go to make the payments, so payments will be semi-annual, annual principal, and then semi-annual interest payments. But if you elect to, for budgeting purposes, just makes it easier, you can put money in monthly. And we're allowed to invest those monies at any rate. We don't have to, you have to keep track of them, but we don't have to worry about arbitrage for debt service monies. Again, smallest year exception, you probably won't qualify for that. And then the next page is just disclosures of conflicts of interest. We are an independent municipal advisor to put your needs first, teach you the best deal. Disclose any conflict, which I do not believe we have it. Any questions?
Real quick, you mentioned that the obligation would be, I guess it's statute, the principal payment would be annual and the
Typically,
interest semi-annual.
typically, yes.
Typically.
Now, you can, I've seen sometimes where you'll have semi-annual principal also. It's just kind of there's no, I don't know that it's required to be that, just kind of market accepted. That's pretty much how all municipal bonds are. And we can select the month that the principal, when you're getting more taxes in, tax bills come in, we're not gonna have a July 1 end of fiscal year principal payment, because then it gets tricky. We'd recommend you not do that if you choose to, because you end up paying the check on sometime in June, and then you got, kind of goofy on the audit. But yeah, as we get through, typically your first principal payment will be a year-ish from when you sell the bonds. But a lot of times also during these construction periods, we may not have principal that first year. Just a lot of people don't want to pay principal on something that is still under construction.
Which one's gonna satisfy the
Yes, absolutely. Now, there are certain ways that you could borrow capitalized interest. And again, getting kind of into the weeds, we could borrow money to make the first few interest payments if, you aren't going to have the funds to do that. Again, another question we'll ask as we get a little bit closer and narrow down the size of that. But yeah, 2 years ago, we didn't do that a lot, just because you would borrow the money to make those interest payments and you would be investing it at 0%. Now you could borrow money for capitalized interest and invest it still above that bond rate. So it doesn't sting quite as bad. It still costs you because you're paying for it over the life of the bond issue. Unless you really front load that principal, but it doesn't sting quite as bad since you can actually invest the funds for 18 months or so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so with the interest rate and this option you're offering, I understand that, but as far as the interest rate, when that would kick in, because I understand that you're mentioning that no one knows what the market's going to do, right? But
Right.
currently the Fed is signaling to lower interest rates. Jay Powell has signaled at the last meeting that he had, like this week, that there could be lower interest rates. So if we were to sign up with something like this, of course, and I'm going to sort of, throw out that I would probably lean toward a vote on this, like not like sidestepping the vote would be my personal opinion. So if we did do a vote on it, and we were to, we wouldn't be able to do a vote till a certain point. So how would that work? When would that interest rate kind of lock in?
Actually be determined, right? Yeah, so that's the kind of tricky thing about bonds. We would like to sell the bonds after you guys have your final cost. And until that day when we actually sell the bonds, work with an underwriter and lock in those interest rates. Leading up to that, we'll have good estimates. They'll tell us, we can communicate, hey, here's where they are. Do you want to proceed with that? And then on the day of the sale, we ask, but so say, you get it all done. Again, I'm not sure on the timeline, say it's February, when you're wanting to, you have your final number, you're ready to proceed with the project. Everything's ready to go with Brandstetter. You give us the go ahead, and then probably sometime in February or March, once we have those numbers The rate's not locked in until that time. If something were to happen, we typically, we say we can't time the market. If it's a turbulent time, we may postpone it during COVID. We pushed a few bond sales off because the market went crazy. Interest rates got spiked up on us for a while.
I understand.
But
But from the time that we would say, okay,
Mhm.
that's the time you put it out to market.
right.
You couldn't
yes,
put it out to market until we said, okay, and we
Right,
couldn't say,
until you
okay,
passed
until we
the-
had a vote
right.
in a
So-
certain circumstance, and you put it out to market, and whatever the market dictated at that moment
Mhm.
would be what we got. And then
Right.
your estimation at this point is like 3.8.
Mhm.
So my follow-up question is going to be a little bit unfair. But that versus just like, why can't we go out and get a bank loan? Like, and you guys will tell me
Absolutely.
this is
No,
why,
no,
and
no,
I
that's-
understand, but
Sure.
I think the average person doesn't understand these government loans and the
Absolutely.
bonds and everything.
Right now, we're seeing bank loans because they borrow money, they loan out money based on that Fed funds rate, the Fed funds overnight rate. So their rates right now are quite a bit higher. We're looking at, a 10-year deal. I'm getting quotes from, I got a quote for someone at 5.5% for US Bank. And typically banks will not lock an interest rate in for longer than 10 years. These will be fixed for the full term. What we have done a little bit is issue something called bond anticipation notes, where we go to banks and we bid it out to banks and say we borrow money for 2 years in anticipation of selling bonds. If we don't know exactly what it is, the exact name, interest rate environment we don't like, you can do something like that and then say from year one to year two, we may be able to pay off that bond anticipation note with the bank with long-term bonds at some time. So that could be an option. Right now, I'll tell you, I guess the last bond anticipation we did was for the city of Covington. And a 3-year bond anticipation note, I think, was 428, something like that, 430. So it's a little bit higher. Probably seen on the news, I've got a lot of different things going on, so a lot of moving parts, so they elected to do that.
So to use your example, page whatever, but for a 20-year, $16.5 million bond,
Mhm.
that's fixed for that 3.884 20 years. Following column, 25 years, 4.07, et cetera, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep. And again, those are fixed for the full term unless interest rates were lower after that 7 to 8 years. We're going to have a period of 7 or 8 years. And again, we'll kind of determine that with the market, what they can stomach. That 7 to 8 years is a window where the investors that ultimately buy your bonds and put them in their retirement portfolio, they want to know that they're getting that interest rate for a set amount of time. And so after that set amount of time that we determine with you all, you can refinance that. So if we're borrowing at 3.88 and the market's at 3%, just like a mortgage, we go back and refinance that. And kind of the same process that we're doing here, do more bonds, possibly a bank issue.
And that X number of years is negotiable.
It's negotiable. So I will say the shorter. So we've had places that, say they built a business park knowing they're going to sell lots. We make that a lot shorter because they know they're going to get cash in to pay it off. It's kind of a give and take of the longer that term is, in theory, the lower interest rate that they're willing to accept because they know they're going to get it for a longer. Currently in the market, we're seeing 7 to 8 years. Before the 2018 tax law changes, 10 years was the industry standard for a call. But that tax prior to 2018, you could advance refund those a couple years before then. 2018 tax law changes did away with that. So 8 is very doable, and we've been doing 7 years quite a bit, just in hopes that in 7 years rates are a little bit lower. Historically, maybe we should put a chart in here, but these rates are pretty median. If you look at a 20-year chart, look at a 30-year chart, they're low, but of course that brings in Reagan times. So.
Roger that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Now we're going to have Ben Brent Stetter and Eric Chambers with Brent Stetter Carroll. And obviously, we've had 2 work sessions and already gone through all the nitty gritty on their recommendations. And then the results of what the steering committee had come up with as suggestions. So Ben's going to get into a little bit more detail in terms of what next steps could potentially be on this if the board votes to move forward tonight, just so it's a lot clearer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me back this evening. Our slide deck is up, and so I'm going to try to make this about the same level of boring as the. So,
Good luck.
I think the slides that we put together are pretty on par with that. So just bear with me. So there we go. So really what we're talking about tonight is just having a discussion with you guys about really the 3/4 predominant modes of project delivery for our industry, really for public projects. We're going to talk about design, build, and construction management. And my ask of you is, if you have any questions, please just interrupt me. Let's talk about it, because we're going to kind of go through these step by step. And I can give you examples of during the course of this conversation of where we have used various project delivery methods, so we can get into those discussions and kind of the reasons why those projects went that way. So staying with this legal theme, the ORC defines that the design bid build as construction and managing an entire public improvement project under the award of a single aggregate lump sum contract. So really what that means is kind of obviously what the name of it implies. We have a design process, we have a bid process, and then we have a build process. So this, there would be 2 contracts that the township would have. One would be with the owner, and one would be with the general contractor. And then the architect and the design professional in this case would work on the cost estimates and just go through the entire design process with the township to get to a set of bid documents that we would publicly bid and publicly advertise those. Kind of the typical process I think that you guys are generally used to on township projects. The general contractor is the one that holds all the contracts with the subcontractors, and our role as the architect of record is to serve as a construction administrator of the project, and essentially your eyes and ears, and because we would have a relationship directly with you guys as our client, and so we act as your advocate during the construction phase. In addition, we go through the design, construction documents, bidding, and construction administration process. And there's going to be a common theme that kind of surfaces the top here, but success really depends on the quality of the general contractor and the project manager. At the end of the day, it comes down to people, and if you associate yourself with good people, you're going to end up getting good results. So, and you'll kind of see how that is evident here later on. From our experience, this is a good process for projects under $10 million in total capital costs, where you have minimal owner relocations, or you have less phasing that you have to deal with, and the ones where you want to have good local subcontractor involvement in this community. I think this metro area is large enough that finding good subcontractors is not necessarily going to be a challenge for a project of this size. The general contractor is responsible for all the construction work, and it's our role as architect to enforce that and make sure the project is built to the plans and specifications. We do recommend that the owner provide an in-house single point of contact. Sometimes it's noted here as a project manager. Sometimes that can be a full-time role. Most of the time it's somebody in one of these guys' shoes that serves as that primary point of contact. But they're going to be heavily involved during the entire course of the project. And then finally, the general contractor does assume the construction and the financial risk on the project, because it is a hard bid on that. The advantages for this, the contractors are bid competitively. And the design and construction roles are clearly defined. And really, you guys, what I want to emphasize is you guys are an active participant, especially during the design phase of the project. There will be, if you thought we spent a lot of time with you guys during the study phase, it's going to become more intense to get your all's input, because at the end of the day, this is your all's project. The disadvantages of the design bid build are the phases are sequential and may require more time, because you've got to go through those, the design process, the bidding process, and then go into the construction administration. And the owner is at risk for the final construction costs, kind of alluding to where the timing of those bonds and when those can be sold. So you don't really know what that final construction cost is until we get through that bidding process.
I'm gonna take you up on the interrupt.
Please, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. So like you got a general contractor, essentially, you got an architect and you got the people doing the work, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, like if the work isn't done right, like whose butt do we kick? Like who do we go after? Do we just talk to you and you cascade that down to the other, to the GC and the people doing the work? Or like, do we have a lot of administrative work with our administrator, like essentially to chase people down if something's not getting done?
We would be an active participant. You would probably kick our butt, and then we would kick somebody else's butt.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, we're not going to come in and remediate and do that final work.
Yeah,
That's why
I understand that,
retainage
but-
and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So we're working for you guys as the township, and that's what.
So if there were any issues with the build as it was commencing, then we would potentially get with you and you would try to mitigate that and handle it the best that you could.
Typically, you on this type of, you have a monthly progress meetings. We call, owner, architect, contractor, where everybody gets together in the same room, talks about stuff, talks about the schedule, budget, where we are, what other issues are out there, because issues will come up. We're not building widgets here. We're building something that nobody's ever built before. So conflicts come up with HVAC, mechanical systems, all kinds of stuff. And so those meetings serve as kind of that forum to have those conversations, hopefully so we can head them off in the past and identify them earlier in the process before it becomes a major issue.
Right. But if you don't, I just was curious about how that worked.
Well, there's also a warranty period.
Yeah.
What was it, 11 months or 12 months we come back? And 10 months, I'm sorry. And, so we want to be engaged with you guys on the project.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys have been great to work with so
Well, thank you. I
far, so I don't mean to just playing devil's advocate.
No, that's fine. No, that's why we're here
Yeah.
tonight. Yeah. And there is no right or wrong answer. I just want to say that it's making that selection of how you do this is based upon how you guys want to administer the project, what your goals are, what your time commitments are to devote to the project, because whichever one you do is going to be staff time and trustee time. You guys just need to kind of balance that. So I'm going to move on to the design build model. The ORC defines that as an integrated delivery system for which a person is responsible to a public authority for both design, construction, demolition of a public improvement. So under the design build model, the owner would hire what we call a criteria architect. And so a criteria architect is that professional service provider for the owner, for the public entity in this case. The criteria architect would develop the building program, provide site analysis, develop that preliminary cost data, and then prepare a procurement package for the design builder to come in at that stage of the process. So the owner issues an RFQ for design of the buildings. You typically shortlist that to 3 contractor teams, because those contractor teams will include their own architect that will end up producing the drawings. And then the owner receives those. You guys look at that and you make the selection based upon best value. You really don't have enough information at that point in time to make a decision based upon the price of the project. And you'll see here why here in a few minutes. So the architect of record is, once you select a design builder, the architect of record is working for them. Typically during those processes, as you're going through that selection, you'll interview 3 different design builders. They each have their own architect, so you're interviewing a team of people that you're going to work with on that stage of the project. The design builder's architect then is the one who signs and seals and stamps all the drawings. The criteria architect provides the construction administration. So like we would do with a design bid build, the criteria architect is with you during the entire run of the project and would still be the butt you're going to kick.
But you guys, that's not you guys though. You guys.
We have, can I table that
Yes,
question?
yes.
The answer is yes. But, we've served as the criteria architect for design build projects. We've also served as the architect of record for design build projects. But you cannot, we don't serve as both. Because the reason you do a design build is to kind of is different. And you want to impart some of the creativity in that through that relationship with the design builder. And so if you're serving as both the criteria architect, who you're supposed to be serving the owner, and as the architect of record working for the contractor, it creates conflicts. So if this route is chosen, then, there's probably there may be a legal requirement that they not be there. We would make sure that one of our first comments to you is there's a criteria architect and an architect of record, and those are two separate groups.
I understand.
Okay. The design builder in this case assumes the financial risk, construction and financial risk on this. We go on the next page. So this is a good process for what we consider to be kind of relatively simple public buildings. Although we've done what I would consider to be complex public buildings as well. And we can talk about that as we talk about examples and probably things that you guys would recognize in the community. The quality control aspect is a little bit more challenging because the architect of record is not putting together the construction documents. So there's some concern there. Limited construction marketplace, not every general contractor does design build projects. You need a certain level of expertise, comfort, and relationships with other design professionals in the region to be able to put that team together to do that. And we can talk about that a little bit more later. The owner does have less control during construction. The most input that you guys are going to have is during that criteria architect phase, when the criteria documents are being put together, and that's your ability to communicate to the construction community what you want to see inside this building. You're not going to be able to pick out the color of the wood finish on a dais. It depends on how deep you want to get into the criteria architect phase. We have seen design build RFPs come out from the criteria architect as little as 3 pages. I think the Trenton one was, they said they wanted X many square feet of a municipal building. That was it. And then we've also seen ones that have the criteria documents were 2 3-inch thick 3-ring binders. So I think both of those are the extreme. If you guys decide to go down that route and we serve as a criteria architect, you want to have the conversation about what are the things that are really important to you guys, and what are not as a high of a priority level. The advantages. Oh, there you go. It's perceived to be the fastest project delivery system. We can kind of talk about that. The why behind all that stuff. It does provide a single source of responsibility, early cost and scheduling opportunities. And as conflicts do occur internally, they may or may not involve the owner, because you've got that relationship with the design builder and their architect of record that's kind of has to deal with those problems as they come up. The disadvantages, the construction cost may not be as competitive. As I said earlier, the owner doesn't have as much involvement. The documents are generally are not complete. I would almost say documents are not complete when the GMP is executed, and GMP is guaranteed maximum price. I mentioned kind of the conflict of interest in the role as designer and contractor. And the construction process typically, historically, has not been monitored in the same manner because you've got a different group putting the documents together and representing the. So, all right, we're 2/3 of the way through this, so bear with me. CM at risk is where the authority to plan, coordinate, manage, and construct all the phases rest with the construction manager in an at-risk. We're going to talk about an at-risk scenario, and then as an agent. So we really have talking two different things here. So the construction manager at risk, we go back to that earlier. Keep going. I'm sorry. There are two contracts, one with the architect and then one with the construction manager. This construction manager in this case provides pre-construction services. So they're along for the design process early on in the process. So they're able to provide as close to real-time cost estimating for the project as possible. Project sequencing is important as we talk about phasing and what gets built when and all that kind of stuff. Provide real-time feedback on constructability and also owner relocations if that's part of the overall process. So in this one, the architect provides the design and construction documents. The CMAR monitors that all the way during the process. If we have like monthly design meetings, whatever that might be, but they're along for the ride. So they, in theory, they know the project and what they're supposed to be building all the way through design, and they have a better handle on the why behind what, why various decisions were made during that design process. The CMAR does agree to provide a guaranteed maximum price. We note on here it's at an agreed upon percentage of document completion. Sometimes that might be 75% documents, 90% documents, or 100% documents. That's going to be something critical to discuss as you make the selection of the CMAR, and there's value reasons to do that. That can be discussed later. At this one, the architect does complete the plans and specs, just like the design bid build. Then once the plans and specs are done, then the CMAR seeks the bids from directly from the subcontractors, and the CMAR does not mark up the bids like they would in a design bid build project. So it's a little bit more of an open book type situation. They do charge a fee plus some expenses on there. The CMAR does provide that on-site management, the day-to-day management of the superintendent, the project manager, and then the architect would serve in that construction administration role, like we would in the first example. Going through the selection process for the CM at risk, the RFQ is used for the qualifications. Typically interview 3 of them, and then the owner selects the CMAR based upon the best value proposition. That sometimes includes price, sometimes does not. It does not necessarily have to. That's why it's a best value proposition. Essentially, kind of going back to that people analogy, it's who are the people that you want to work with during the course of this project over the next 2 to 3 years. The advantages on this one is the architect is still the agent for the owner. The early cost commitment gives the owner more clarity on what the project costs are going to be, because we've got the contractor on board who is seeing the real-time data during the design process. And I would say the last 2 years or 3 years, depending on how you look at it, of the inflation and cost escalation that's been happening in the construction market, there's been immense value in having that construction manager on board to provide that clarity, and so that both the owner and the architect are designing the right size building to the budget. And we could tell stories about that all night. But the disadvantages are there is an added cost layer through that construction manager. that you're gonna see. The bidding may not be as widespread because you're not opening up necessarily to the entire GC and subcontractor marketplace. And we have seen variations in the GMP. And then the related tool in the toolbox is the construction manager advisor. The construction manager on this one establishes the schedule, but does not control it, kind of serves as a mediator between the parties. And the advantages provides additional expertise to the owner by having that construction manager on board, and help with that initial cost estimating. There is an added cost to that. Multiple prime contracts are then contracted directly with the township, so there's an additional administrative burden on the township side. So that's probably of the kind of the 3/4 that we've talked about. The CM advisor is probably the one that we see the least. And I'm going to stop right there and let you guys digest all this and see if you have any questions. I know I've kind of thrown a lot out at you.
Any question? I have none.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Who's next?
Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet you could.
Yeah.
So with that presentation, I guess I have a question, but my question is before all of this. How much of this is required by law to be put out for bid for contractors? In other words, Brensler Carroll isn't going to get a directed contract necessarily. How much of this and as well, you know, what's your new name? I'm sorry, Ross, RSA. I mean, do we have to put these pieces, these components out to bid legally?
I think we already have our contract with Brensler Carroll, we understand.
And so that would be looked at as a change order?
No, I mean, are you gonna discuss the third?
I think I have to go back and look at that. We were selected to do the study
Right.
for this.
That's what I'm
And,
getting.
Yeah, so that's what we've been selected. So, and I think that traditionally that just leads straight into a design.
Okay, I just want to make sure
But,
that we're on the right path.
Yeah.
Been bid with respect to the contract.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Construction side, I
Right.
understand that part,
But
but for this piece, taking the next jump, because we still have some more studies, some more work to do. As the RSA people pointed out, we're still in silo A, right? Or silo 1, however that presentation worked. So we're a long way from the finish line. But do we have to put out a bid for Brandstetter to take next step? Or can we just do change order and move
Just do a
forward?
change order
Okay.
and move forward.
But I would think what would be helpful on our end is knowing, because you can see our role differs, design build, design build, and then CMR.
Right.
And we've done all that. We have worked on all those projects. And I mean, I had a conference call today on a design build project where we were that architect of record working for the contractor. So we do all that. We do that stuff all the time. And I think from our perspective, having more clarity about the direction that you guys want to go and kind of given those three options,
Right.
the better we'll be able to serve you guys and tailor our services to that.
But having said that, that then jumps into
Okay.
another question for me, which is, do we have to pick design bid or any of those options? At what phase do we have to do that? So we
So-
have to do that because the way I kind of envision it, and maybe I'm wrong, is that there's still some more movement from left to right on a page to decide price, facility, design, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so we're not quite to a bid build or any construction type discussion yet. So when would we have to decide whether or not to go bid build or?
Yeah, I think, to give you guys flexibility on that, one pathway that we could take would be that we would still follow
and set up our typical design process.
Mhm.
And within those construction document phase is a schematic design, design development, and then a construction document. And then we go to bidding. And the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, their standard contract, lays all that stuff out and what the deliverables are at each phase.
Mhm.
A normal break point for that. Your essentially your question is when do we need to make that decision? I would say if you guys got through the schematic design phase, that would, at the end of the schematic design phase, that would be a logical point to try to provide some clarity. Because if you go beyond that and have us complete design development drawings,
Right.
The value of going with, well, I think that's a point where we need to have that conversation. We can have another conversation at design development, but by having a conversation there, it kind of, in my mind, the design build option
Mhm.
becomes less, there's less value associated with that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think if you wait till then, we would
Designed
say,
it out.
we would say, well, design, bid, build, or the construction manager.
Right.
And so I think because you're going to get that value, the construction manager, whenever you bring them on. We're working on a project up in Middletown right now for a new community center. And we did it, design, bid, build. This was bid out last fall. Numbers came in over budget. One of the project partners walked away from the project. So we kind of had to go back to a redesign. And we had conversations with the city about, hey, how do we get this project done in this environment of, constantly changing construction costs.
Mhm.
And so they brought a CM on board. Essentially when we were starting the redo of the construction document phase, but they really provide a lot of value in helping us understand the cost impacts. A lot of times, small design decisions can have a big cost impact.
Mhm.
And, we're not always gonna pick up on. So it's nice to have the eyes and the ears of somebody who's actually gonna figure out how to put that seal together and how to put that HVAC system together.
Right.
To get that done.
Right. I get that.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. And you guys with RSA, you did the analysis that you provided us tonight, which is a 30,000 foot view. Have you taken any looks into our revenue streams as to what would be available to make the payments?
Sure. Yeah, we've had some preliminary discussions. We haven't done a full ratings analysis, still waiting to get your latest audit back from the state. The
Right.
state takes a little bit of time to complete that. So the numbers were based on a solid investment rating that we're pretty confident, good demographics in the area, of course.
Because as I look at the chart, I see, the amount that we would, our payment plan. I see that, but what I don't see is from our side, where that's coming from.
Right.
If
Yeah,
it's
that's
going to be a 600,000 or an 800,000 or $1 million a year payment, you have not gone to that level. yet.
right. We're not to that point yet.
Okay.
No, sir.
We haven't been audited yet,
Right.
so we're
Mhm.
still waiting.
Mhm.
Yeah, but we do have a financial report.
Okay.
We can share.
Yeah, that would be great. It'd be a great start.
Yeah, for sure. I was just curious about,
Yes.
about that piece. So, all right, thank you. Okay. Those were all my questions. Tim, what's the game? My question next is, I know that we have under new business, we have item 4. Do we want to move that up to this point and have that discussion and just clear that off the decks right now? That motion.
So with item 4, if I understand it correctly, is that we have an option A or an option B as far as like the possibly, it seems like the way everything's leaning, that the facility, the standalone facility sort of in the Amelia area for police and fire, a joint facility, or the standalone joint facility combined with a building renovation here. Obviously, the latter being, a few $1 million more expensive. So we have those two options. But all we're doing is directing Branstetter Carroll to continue to move forward, like you stated, Alan. There's going to be a lot more, you know, there's a few more horses that need to come before that cart as far as financing and bonds and issuance and rates and, nailing down on contractors and who does what. But at this phase, we're just going ahead and it's sort of getting Branstetter Carroll the authorization to move forward with proceeding with one of these two options. It's my understanding. So if I'm wrong on that, somebody please correct me.
I don't think you're wrong. There's some wording that I'm concerned about.
No, I'm fine with
inside
that.
the
I
motion.
wasn't really bringing that up.
Well, the way I read the wording, and this, I've been thinking about this since we got that from you, Tim. The proposed motion is a motion to adopt. Can I read it or just?
Yeah.
Okay. A motion to adopt resolution 2024-017, a resolution approving the board's direction to accept and adopt the recommendation. So I stopped there when I was thinking about this, okay, before I went any further. So the way I'm reading this, and perhaps you can clarify, Counselor, if we do choose to adopt this resolution, we're just, this is the way I interpreted it. We are approving, we are accepting and adopting the recommendation, but that's not committing us to doing anything further beyond that. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct. You're accepting and adopting the recommendation for the particular avenue in which you're going to proceed with this building. So it would be moving in that direction, directing Branstetter Carroll to move in that direction with respect to where you want this facility and how you want this facility constructed. We're not doing anything more than just, please give us this, design, build, construction manager, whatever option with respect to this avenue.
And I understand all that and I get it. But then as you read further into the motion, and this is where I just have some question about it, because it says that the Township's Facility Needs Committee to move forward with the financing and construction of a new public safety facility. To read that, it implies that that's the next step. We're going to build and finance, or finance and build. And that seems like a real finite next step. It doesn't discuss a process. It just discusses that's what we're going to do. So to me, I think that's an important distinction.
I read it a little bit differently, and I think it's going to depend on where you put the commas and the parentheses. I think we're just, Counselor, I think you already said this, but if we do adopt this, we're just adopting a recommendation, correct? Which can be later modified, curtailed, whatever.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we're giving guidance to Branstetter Carroll's how we want this building to be constructed. And they're going to, in response to that, they're going to provide us with options. I mean, it's.
Okay, I'm sorry. So my follow-up question to that would be, if this motion were to carry, are we committing to finance and construct?
The way I read it, it does. Excuse me.
Wait, I'm asking the questions. I want to have my
Well, I'm
question
giving-
clarified by the two professionals here, and then you can opine after that.
Well, I'm the
Go ahead.
chair of the committee.
Well, wait a minute. My question
I
wasn't
think we
answered
get
yet.
to choose.
Wait, my question wasn't answered yet. Wait, my
Fine.
question wasn't answered. Please.
Well, no, I've lost track.
Let me restate it, okay? And Tim, you're welcome to chime in because I'm asking for your professional opinion as well. Again, just to express what I understand I'm reading here. If we adopt this, we're approving a recommendation to adopt the recommendation, but we are not approving the financing and construction. Is that correct? Okay, so, and just to ask my follow-up question, to which I haven't received an answer, but maybe you can help me with this. Can this then later be modified, rescinded, curbed back,
What do you mean by this?
further plans to construct and or finance?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we're just approving that recommendation with respect to how you want this, where you want this facility constructed. We are not committing further than that.
And I'd like to get your opinion on that too, Mr. Williams.
Last one. It's just authorizing staff to continue working with RSA or someone else on the board's choice, as well as, us, our fiscal officer, figuring out what the financing would be and how that would work. So it's really just getting the mechanics going at this point. It's not committing to anything.
Okay, I yield to the chairman. Thank you.
My point was simply that I don't agree with that. I feel like it reads differently. And I was only simply going to ask the maker of the motion to insert the word process. So when it says this piece about Township Facility Needs Committee to move forward with the financing and construction of a new public safety facility at Oak and Maple, I was simply going to say, add the word process in between there so that it does give some flexibility to the motion so that we go through a process which was outlined today by RSA and shows how we're moving forward. So it's just a simple request for.
I would say that changes nothing based off of what you interpreted already, right? I mean, you
that's
just,
the intention or the spirit
sort
of
of-
the motion. So if you want to add process, I agree. That would be fine language.
sounds fine.
Okay, you're good with that?
I'm fine.
Okay. So then we just have to pick which of the two we're comfortable with. We have,
So I personally would kind of lean in as the chairman of the committee, and I don't speak for them, 100%, but my personal feeling has been going through everything and based off of, the kind of the interpretation I have of our budget and whatnot, that we maybe should kind of go for option B. And that would be my recommendation, is to start with option B. And if we wanted to do further building renovations within the township, we could always have that option down the road. But we could get our foot in the door and start the process of getting the police and fire what they need, and then worry later about possibly renovating this building, which we've been getting by with for quite some time.
I tend to agree. I think that gives us the most flexibility to move forward. We're looking at both options. We're moving forward with the process as it's outlined, and it really, to me, I think option B makes the most sense.
I concur. After having studied it, I think that's probably the better way to proceed.
Okay, with that, then I'll make the motion that we accept option B
As amended.
as amended.
Just so we're clear on the verbiage, could somebody read what we're going to adopt with the new language inserted into that? Where are we putting that in there? I mean, like,
It
within
would be
the-
the Township's Facility Needs Committee to move forward with the financing and construction process of a new public safety facility at Oak and Maple.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on the matter? Hearing none, roll call, please. Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
So we have a meeting coming up then to talk about potential levy, police levy, right?
Yes, we do.
So that's the really important next step on this.
Right. That's where we start to fill in the finance piece to how we start to move forward with this process. Okay, if there's nothing else, you guys are welcome to stay. We can return.
I
the
know you
favor.
guys are you're having a blast.
Otherwise, we can move on to departmental updates, and let's start with Chief Brockstrom. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The township and the steering committee continue to move forward, planning our National Night Out, which is scheduled for August 7th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Locust Corner Park. We put many months of preparation into this, the steering committee has. And so we think we're going to put on another good event. This year, it's not going to be just the police National Night Out. We're making it police and fire to combine forces here. The other thing I wanted to bring up is last week, Channel 12, if you saw the piece, did a very nice story on the links and the transformation of that property, which has gone through quite a transformation in the past 4 or 5 years. The report itself, a comprehensive report on the changes to the links, is on the police department's website, on the police department tab of the township's website. So I encourage you to take a look at that and see the changes that have occurred and the service demand that has gone down because of the changes made by the property management and by the township and county. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you guys see the little, the thing on, what was it, Channel 12? While you're always great on television, there was a new star that is about to eclipse your, your notoriety. That it is the director in charge, Mr. Eddie. Eddie, you did a great job. Everybody, give him a round of applause. You did a fantastic job. Was that your first time on TV? Might have been third. You did a fantastic job. You did a fantastic job. But that was actually the culmination of a lot of good work and a lot of good work done by Trustee Kelly. And so, that's one of the moments where you actually see something come to fruition of the work that you put in. So
Thanks, Alan. And the county's prosecutor's office did a lot of work on that too. But what are your radio runs down to that monthly? Do you have an idea offhand?
So just for a point of reference, back in 2021, we were averaging 37 calls a month at that property. This year, we've had 22 calls to date. So quite a difference.
That's huge.
Yeah.
You're cutting that by 6 or 7 times.
Yeah. Not to mention the level of violence that occurred 3 or 4 years ago versus, now.
Yeah, it's been an effort on all fronts. You guys have done a good job though. Thank you. We'll give Chief Bachman a little bit of credit. Maybe. But you've done great, Chief. Thank you.
Okay, Chief Wright, you're up.
Just want to remind everybody the Claremont County Fair is later this month, July 21st to 27th. So if you come out, you can see local goat and chicken farmer Mike Masterson there, along with a few of our other employees. We had a road closure last week on Hopper Hill for a day and a half so that they could collect some borings for a landslide. So without having more information, that just leads me to believe we have another road closure coming up in the future. Once they get that ironed out, it's on the close to the Nordike end where the hill is. And then I participated in a meeting with ODOT a couple weeks ago. There's a planned closure for State Route 749 between Wagner and Cole and around Bristol for another slide for them to reinforce the creek wall. They're estimating for that to start around March of 25. It's approved, I think, last up to 5 months, but they're not sure until they get in there how much or how long it's actually going to take. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you.
Chief, would you touch on that topic you and I discussed about those locked defibrillators as a potential option for our park or parks?
Sure. Recently, Batavia received a park improvement grant. They installed a couple of AEDs in their park and some outdoor weatherproof, tamper-proof cabinets that are combination locked. So essentially, the communications center has that code on file in the CAD system. So if somebody was to call 911 for somebody in cardiac arrest, the dispatcher could give them the code to open the cabinet to get the AED out to use it. So Dr. Campbellis and I had a couple of discussions through email looking at the potential of including that in our parks with the activity at our park here on Locust Corner and potentially looking at one of the Amelia parks. So we're going to explore, get a firm cost of what the cabinet's going to cost, some AED options and what the total cost of the project would be.
Maybe some funding streams, et cetera.
Yeah, see what we can come up with.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, Service Department, what you got, John?
Well, we've been doing a lot of work on the baseball field. As far as around the outside, we got the pads poured for the dugout. And then we're now continuing to pour around the backside of the dugout for the backstop. And then continue on with the sidewalk going out to the parking lot for ADA compliance. It's gone pretty well so far. We're doing that in-house, so you still got to do our regular duties and just kind of keep trucking along on it. But I did get information that the cabin chassis, the Freightliner that you guys approved earlier this year, it is to start being built on 8/12/24. So now that's just cabin chassis. And then I had to go to an outfitter after that, but
Yeah.
it's moving along and I was glad to see that I got a date for that. So.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Anything else?
Nope.
Parks and Green Space Committee. And by the way, Michelle, you did a fantastic job with the pledge.
Thank you.
You've improved greatly.
Practicing.
Yeah.
June 22nd concert was a success. Net beverage sales was $2,300. No incidents, positive feedback from the attendees and the volunteers. So we thank everyone here that showed up and we had a great time. Planning is underway for our August 24th concert, as well as our September 14th movie nights. Ohio Landstar would like to use our park as a fundraising event on September 21st. They have a band lined up as well as food and other vendors. They would like for the township to provide beverage sales so that the township would collect the proceeds from that. Ohio Landstar is a great organization, has provided major help for the concerts and national night out, and we fully support helping them with this fundraiser that they're trying to do. We're trying to get a new drone for all their efforts that they do. So
Michelle, on that, may I ask you a question?
go ahead.
Mr. Williams, maybe you can chime in here. Would you explain what you and I talked about as far as perhaps if the township were to sponsor Ohio Landstar, that the fee would be waived? Did I understand that correctly?
Sure. So we had, if you recall, last year, we adopted the special events policy via resolution. And so there's a fee of $75 for renting the facility, one of our facilities and having a special event. But if the township chooses and the trustees to sponsor that, we can waive that fee and in some cases be able to waive some of the support. We don't know exactly what the support is going to be required of the township outside of that, but potentially some of that could be waived as well.
Thank you.
So if the board wants to take a motion to that effect, then we can get it. We will, Michelle, I think I mentioned to you, need to make sure that they fill out the special events request form, and Carl has that before we.
He sent that to me. I sent it on to the chief and he was waiting on one answer.
Perfect.
Which I'm bringing to him tonight when I leave here. So he'll send that right back to you guys. He has also reached out and has secured insurance for the event as well. So he's covering his bases and he hopes to have a great turnout. He has a band that is going to perform free. So, I think it'll be a great time.
Oh, I think it's
So-
an honor, actually, that they've chosen to ask us to host it in our park. I mean, really, after all they've done for not just Pierce Township, but for the greater tri-state community. I mean, that's an invaluable organization and
It's a great.
hard work, very dedicated people that do very grueling and sometimes unfortunately gruesome work. And for them to ask to do that in our park, is pretty, we should be honored by that. And I would, when it's time, I would gladly make that recommendation for a resolution.
Other than that, the scout projects, the lending library has been installed over at the park and the bat houses should be installed this coming week. Bat houses are up, open for business, vacant. They have vacancies.
There you
so-
go.
Sure,
Thank
they'll
you.
fill them up.
All right, so I guess all we're looking for is direction tonight for me to take back to Ohio Landstar if they can use the park on that night and they have our blessing for that, so.
Do we need a motion for that or can we just?
Yeah, I'd like
To waive the fee.
Since it's a resolution, a motion that you'd support, if that's all right.
So moved.
But the question is, what is the motion? Is it just to use the park or for us to be the sponsor?
And waive the fee.
But let's just ask, I just have one quick question about whether or not that tangles up their insurance. So if we're the sponsor and they have insurance, do they just waive their insurance? I just want to make sure we don't screw them up. Because if they,
in return, we would still want, since they're running the event and not us, they would want them to supply the insurance for that.
okay, but I don't want to tangle you, so I don't want to tangle them up and hurt their insurance because ours is now it's our event. Is it our insurance? That's the only thing I'm
I'm
concerned
sure
about.
their insurance would hate to get tangled up and not have to cover something.
Well, that's true,
Their
but
insurance would probably be heartsick about that, I would think. It
But,
would just be totally distraught.
Tim, I'm not sure what the special events policy looks like, but if you wanted to be a co-sponsor of the event, we might have more leeway with respect to who accepts liability insurance. I mean, it's on township property, so we already have kind of incurred some liability with respect to that. But if we're co-sponsor, I don't know, I don't want to make the recommendation if that will impact the fee waiver. I don't know how our special events policy reads, but that could be a solution to involve both liability providers.
yeah, that's the only thing I was concerned about.
Let's do a co-sponsor.
Yeah.
Sounds like that might be, it's not gonna hurt anything, right?
No,
Unless it has some impact on the fee waiver, which I don't know the answer to.
I don't think we addressed
I
it.
think it's worded as sponsoring an event. But I think there's some gray area there.
There should- I'm sure-
With
yeah.
Sponsoring, I think. you
Sure.
can say that that's the case. And they clean up
So,
the
so I'll make the
Yeah.
motion with the modification that it's not sponsored, but co-sponsor.
I'll second.
What
is the whole, what about the fee? Are you putting that in your motion?
It would be, since it would be sponsored by the township, the fee would be non-existent. We don't have to address that.
So what is your motion?
Uh, to essentially,
Yeah, I do the same thing.
yeah,
It's
I'm
not
sorry. Yeah, Jesus. We need touchscreen left. Add it to the budget. To accept the recommendation and the motion from the Parks Board, with the caveat that it is a, co-sponsor and not simply sponsor.
So we're going to be a co-sponsor, which would waive the $75 fee.
Right.
And he's still going to carry insurance on his end, correct? Is that how I understand that?
Yes.
Perfect.
Correct.
Please go with that. And you second that?
Yes.
Pete seconded it.
I was moving on.
So we'll just do roll call. Right.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
The only other thing
Person
that,
who's dying on-
I wanted to touch base on was that the 4th of July bike parade.
Yeah.
Alan attended, I attended, it was a little drizzly, rainy, but it was a good time too. Thank you for the fire and police showing up. It's always a little, it's very warm and fuzzy, that little event is, and they're always very thankful when they see the fire trucks or the police cars come. So not so much us, but that they get the credit. That's that Jennifer. It's like on Hummingbird. She just does like around the block. It's a resident that does it. She puts it on, and how many bikes do you think were there?
There were, I talked to the person who organized it.
Yeah.
She said there were between 70 and 75 this year. She said that was up.
And that
Last year.
was on a rainy day, so.
Yeah.
So
The
it
kids
was
had
fun.
a blast.
They do. They
Yeah.
had a great time. I'm sorry that, we couldn't do anything over here because it was just too late in the year, but it's on our agenda for next year to try to bring something back to this site as well, so. All right, our next meeting has been moved to Tuesday, the 6th, due to National Night Out being Day. Anything else for me?
I've done.
I will say that the concert in the park turned out excellent. I don't really mean that as a dig. I think the due diligence and all the discussion and everything was good. I think everybody was poised and ready to handle the crowd as it was. I got comment from several residents saying we should do more things like this because it was so engaging and fun, and the band was fun, and
Right.
there was a decent turnout. I kind of liked how you guys had the cars situated on sort of the outskirt. I think that made a good
Mhm.
kind of I don't know, like a hybrid of a car show and a concert,
Right.
and I thought it was really neat.
The for this coming concert, we have show and shine, so it's a Jeep event. So we have some Jeeps, a Jeep group there. The other car group couldn't make it to this concert. So a little bit different, and we talked about that at our meeting this week about what went right, what we need to tweak, but I agree with you, and we had all of our ducks in a row and everything fired on all cylinders, and there was no incidents, and it was a good time.
Everybody
It
seemed
was
to
a
have a
long
good
day,
time.
but it was a good time.
Yeah, most important thing.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for all you guys
Thank you,
work.
guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Next up, planning and development. Eddie,
All right,
you're
Thank
it.
you. So in your packets, I have just the report recap for the Pipe with a Purpose. So there's a memo as well as the final report, which has been posted on our website. Just a brief recap on it. We had a consultant, which was Zone Co, as well as a sub-consultant named David Pearson, who did a lot of illustrations and other design work for the project. Basically, the final recommendation is what's called shifting the center. So basically, ultimately, what that means is continue focusing on beautification of State Route 125. That work has to continue and should continue. But what we heard from the residents was a desire for preservation of green space, connecting neighborhoods to amenities, and augmenting community gathering areas in a town center, that sort of thing. So effectively, a greenway that connects multiple neighborhoods to one another, to the library and so forth, is basically the first step in the main thrust of the recommendation. So presently where it stands right now is we're working with VOX and VOX on the design of the first leg of that trail, which will connect Glen Mary to downtown, the former downtown Amelia neighborhood area and the library. So that's under design. We'll be soliciting public input on that process as well as kind of the coming weeks go on. If you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss as well, but that's basically the main breakdown of it. The next item I have is the solar and wind RFP. So this board's goal setting process included a discussion regarding solar and wind and crafting regulations to update our code books as it pertains to those items. Staff doesn't have the significant amount of capacity presently. So this board directed staff to go ahead and solicit consultant quotes through an RFQ process. We received 2 responses back. Those are $30,000 or more. So we're basically looking for this board's recommendation on how to proceed at this point. They are a little bit higher than what we anticipated. So presently, we're just kind of in a holding pattern.
So we are going to have some discussions about potentially additional staffing within the administrative offices, right? At some point,
Yes.
Debbie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps we should table this until after those discussions.
Totally reasonable.
30,000 is a lot of money.
I tend to agree.
Yes, concur.
Understood.
There you go. Consensus of the board.
Great. The last, well, actually I have 2 more items. One item that came up recently, we were working with the emergency personnel on some concerns regarding Cole Road. There's a curve in the 3000 block of Cole Road on the southbound lane where we're noticing that there are an uptick in accidents due to hydroplaning. Cars are going into oncoming traffic, overcorrecting, ending up in the ditch and so forth. So based off of staff discussions, we reached out to the county engineer's office, and Ms. Biting responded back with her recommendation as a good first step would be basically microfilling a couple portions of the roadway. So it'll be about 300 feet in length, 10 feet in width. She has estimated tentatively, this is not an official number, but approximately not to exceed $1,883 project that could be added on to our paving program. So we're going to wait to hear back from the engineer's office on the timing, the specific timing of that, and the actual bona fide cost of what that would be. But that's just an update. Take this pretty seriously, these safety concerns, particularly because it looks like it's increased potentially due to additional traffic going through that area in Cole Road as well. So we're monitoring that. We're also working with the service department is also looking at it as well regarding signage, guardrails and things to that effect. So we'll be watching this closely. And the last time that we have is we had a grand opening for Popeyes at the corner of Glen Mary and 125. Mr. Bohart handled the coordination of that meeting. It went very well. And so we appreciate his efforts on that.
I am a little disappointed that Poppy, the chicken, was not here at this meeting. I did understand that Carl was looking into actually borrowing the outfit. And I wondered what the progress report was on that, Carl.
Yeah, last minute cancellation.
Chicken on Christmas.
Well, I'm sure they're happy to hear you say that. Okay. All right, so administration, you're next unless there's anything else, Eddie. Okay.
Just real briefly to give the board an update on our engineering RFQ request for qualifications. We received 7 qualifications, which I thought was really good. Our committee it consists of 2 residents and 3 staff members, Mr. Kohler, Mr. McCarthy, and myself. We reviewed all those initially and have narrowed those down to what we believe is the top 3. And we're now in the process of interviewing each one of those firms in person. We hope that the committee as a whole will have a recommendation for the Board of Trustees at the August meeting on firms that we feel very comfortable that the township can work with to meet all of our needs and services, be it engineering, architecture, planning, or what have you. Eddie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty cool, coherently, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss as well.
I have no questions.
No, I was there, so I have no questions.
Good. Anything else, Tim? All right, cool. Okay, what?
The county auditor and I also got the email from Kate in regards to taking every employee, every elected person has to take this required fraud training, reporting and training. It's a 5-minute thing. It has to do with misuse, misappropriation, waste, abuse, everything. We have now September the 28th to complete this. And when you do it at the end, you turn out a little certificate like this. I will need these certificates for auditing purposes when they do come to let me, they will want to see those.
I did not send you mine. Tim has it, so Tim could forward it to you. I completed the course at your request or at your request.
Debbie, I would also just kind of note for everybody that September 1st deadline is for current employees, but when we onboard, if we onboard new employees to the township, there's a shorter time period. So that just needs to kind of be incorporated into our hiring process. I would just recommend that as part of, our orientation.
I'll make an exception. I'm not being told what to do for that. Because I don't have to do anything, right? I mean, I really don't have to do it. I will do it, but I'll make an exception. Oh, I understand. I understand.
All right, is that it? You got that? We're good. And you're going to take the class?
I'm going to take it.
9.
As much as I hate to do it, I saw it. It's not a big deal.
Okay, well, Debbie, you get to be your first up here. So under new business, rock and roll.
Nick is going to make a motion that Nick says. Training. So when
I vote no on the motion.
I request a motion for approval of the payment of payroll for the month of June in the amount of $491,101.75.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
And Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
I request a motion for approval of the payment of bills for the month of June in the amount of $567,939.49.
Moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
And Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
And the third one, we do not need to do anymore because this county does not require us to turn in audit or budgets anymore. So I did do a wiki budget. I did send it out to all you guys, but we don't need anything.
Okay, so we didn't have to make a motion there or pass it. All right, and 4 we already took care of. And so that moves us to Fire Chief Craig Wright.
I request a motion to approve the 4-year preventative maintenance and repair service agreement with Stryker for the fire department AEDs in the amount of $5,472 with an annual cost of $1,368.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. I request a motion to accept the resignations of part-time firefighter EMTs Brianna Mast and Alex Pietrangia effective July 1st, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
And I request a motion to approve the emergency repair to the complex sprinkler system from Elite Fire Services in the amount of $10,515.20.
So moved.
Were you gonna expand on that?
Yeah, so
It's a lot of money.
hey, our sprinkler system for the building is currently down. It developed a leak a couple weeks ago. We've known that one of the valves has been going bad for a while. With the facility process going on, we were trying to kind of slow walk that to see the valve's obsolete. You can't get part for it anymore. The gasket's completely ripped inside. So to get the system back operational, that's going to cost that to replace the valve.
Thank you. I'll second that.
Craig goes, I have some good news and I have some bad news. So that was the bad news.
There you go. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
John, you're up.
I request a motion to purchase 6 30-gallon aggregate trash bins from Belson Outdoor in the amount of $3,240.85.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Debbie.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. John, you're still up.
I request a motion to appoint Zach Keating as a maintenance worker 2 with the service department at the rate of $24.72 per hour.
John, would you mind kind of helping me understand how that came about? Did we advertise that position and so forth?
We did not. Zach worked with us prior. He is come to his senses and wants to come back. But because he was a great worker for us. He already knows the township. He knows the job duties that it entails. There won't be really any training process. So it's kind of he has everything that we need.
Was that a position you're looking to fill, or is that a new position, more or less?
It's kind of,
He's refilling his own hole.
yeah, I'm going to fill a hole that would possibly be empty later, or that will be.
Possibly or is?
Well, I don't know. It's going to be talked about later, I guess. I'm not sure.
What, Mr. Williams, would you have a comment on that or what was that?
I'm not aware of any of this. It was not discussed with me, so I couldn't help you on this.
Okay.
Why don't we table it till after executive session? Is that okay?
Sure.
Fine.
We're gonna discuss some staffing issues.
Okay, fair enough. Is that okay, John?
Yeah.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Eddie, you're up.
I request a motion to pass resolution number 2024-018, a request to take action regarding an abandoned property per ORC 3767.41 for the site located at 84 East Main Street, Pierce Township, Ohio. So just a little background on this project. It was approved actually a couple of years ago as a storage structure before we or mini storage before we changed our regulations. And the site has slowly ground to a halt from a development perspective. We've reached out to the owner, have not received many comprehensive responses on how they intend to finish the site. We've gone back and forth a number of times, and their building permit has since expired. There's also some delinquent taxes on the property. So our recommendation is that we proceed with enforcement action on this based off of the lack of substantive progress.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I request a motion that the Board of Trustees adopt 2 job descriptions, 1 planner and zoning inspector, and 2 a zoning inspector for inclusion in the township personnel roster. A motion may, of course, follow executive session to authorize any advertisements or anything that you deem appropriate. But this motion is merely for a modification to our roster of personnel.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, so I mean, should we just table this until with the other one or?
I think it's just asking
Pretty
for
straightforward.
just naming.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just naming
Gotcha.
positions.
So even if we don't come back with a recommendation to hire anybody or to go out for, to find anybody, at least they start working on a job description.
I see. I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, roll call, please.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, with that, we can move into old business and I don't see any. Unless you guys have something you want to bring up.
Negative.
Okay, then we'll do public comment, open floor discussion. Come on down. Here's the rule. You got to come up here. You got to say your name and your address. Those are the only rules.
Thank you. My name is Jill Fankhauser. I live at 3571 9 Mile Tabasco Road. I moved here when I was 28. We've been here 53 years. I'm now 81 years old and I love it. I love my home. I love my land. And I love everyone who's helped make this a community, safe and beautiful community. I like playing piano and reading and keeping house and various other things, but I don't like government. But I had to come because of those trees that were cut down recently above us. For one thing, I saw the corpses of these huge oaks and 100-year-old trees, and it created quite a problem with erosion. We had mud filling 9 Mile Creek after the last rain, and I want to help keep Pierce Township beautiful and healthful. We know that we can't have air without trees and fresh air. Anyway, I'm ignorant of government, and I probably am in the wrong place to ask where I could see a copy of what the rules and regulations of land use are. Like, I know we're a platted community. We can't put 2 houses on 1 plat. We can't have junk cars built up in the yard. There are things that we have to do in order to live here. And I don't know what they're called. Are they called rules and regulations or resolutions, or where would I find a copy of that?
Well, a couple of different places. Eddie, in the planning department has our land use plan that we recently adopted. So you can get that part of it.
Okay.
Some of the other pieces, Eddie, when we were talking about the construction issues, that's the county level. So
Yeah, so there's a kind of a mix of documents. We have our zoning resolution, that's online. I don't think it'll really totally apply to everything you're going through right now, but we can also get you in contact with the county engineer's office.
Okay.
Soil and water, they also have their own subdivision regulations that deal with.
I hesitate to take your time with that question because it's my personal education, and I'll try to call at a different time. But I also want to mention that I think what I heard was that those trees were harvested. First of all, somebody bought the land, cut them down real quick, like they knew there was something wrong with it, sold them to China for a lot of money. And that's a commercial use. I thought we were a residential area. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you to think about, and I will continue to try to educate myself about it. But I also, if possible, would like to facilitate putting a resolution or whatever it is, the rules and regulations of land use or what people are allowed to do, to change it so that we don't see that kind of activity, people coming in, commercial people coming from outside, taking our beautiful resources and selling them for profit. That just didn't seem right, and it did create damage to the land. So thank you for hearing me out.
all right, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing, oh, sorry.
Just wanted to say thank you. My name is Lisa Wiggins.
Step up in the mic, just so.
Kind of hard to hear you.
All right. Sorry, I'm
There you go.
not used to a mic. My name is Lisa Wiggins. I live at 2825 Pond Run Road. I know that there have been a lot of situations and events that have been taken up at my residence. No one asked me to speak here tonight. I'm here on my own accord. I've grown very tired of the accusations and false statements being spoken against myself and my husband, Michael Wiggins. My husband is a self-made man who cannot read. He has made a very comfortable living and has always provided for his family. These statements made by our neighbors are not true. And I did have video and pictures, but they have to be scrutinized first by legal counsel. In 1993 and 94, Michael painted the inside of the then Du Bois property located at 2855 Pond Run Road. He planted the trees that line that driveway. He also assisted the Willises who live at 2904 Pond Run Road with a huge tree that fell in his yard. A petition signed by the residents of Pond Run Road is from 28 years ago, stating that Mike is prohibited from being on some of the neighbors' property. I would like to know if these records are available, and for the last 28 years seems like an awfully long time. I have a recent letter from Mr. Harry Graves, previous owner of 2825 Pond Run Road, who signed this petition and now states he would have never signed it. I do have that letter. Chief Brocksterman, I did talk to you about a year and a half ago. You came to me and we talked about maybe trying to get someone from Pond Run Road to sit down and talk to me to come up with a resolution. Could you tell me what the Pond Run residents' concerns were?
Well, we did have one resident come forward and we did have a meeting, the three of us.
Yes, sir.
I can't speak as to why other residents didn't come forward. I just didn't get a response from other people.
The meeting was with Mr. Rodney Henry.
The meeting that the three of us had,
Yes, sir.
it was to try to reach some sort of compromise about the loud noise and the gunfire that was occurring.
It was about gunfire. On November 12th, 2023, myself, my husband, and we were with two other hunters, Jason and Justin Price. We were on the backside of our property deer hunting with a bow and arrow. My husband shot a buck in the shoulder and it took off injured. We tried to follow the blood trail while my husband and I stayed on our property, and the two other hunters took a shortcut that crossed a neighbor's property line. We decided to wait until morning to continue looking. We marked the area and went home. The police were called by the neighbors and filed criminal trespassing charges against my husband. We offered to show the police where we were, and we also explained that James and Justin were with us. There was no investigation or questioning from the police. We even offered the other hunters' names and phone numbers, but we were told they were not needed. There are no trespassing signs, no line markers until the Taylors had their property and their parents' property surveyed 10 days after Mike was charged with criminal trespassing. I don't know whatever happened to the statement, innocent until proven guilty, but the pictures that they have or had, you cannot tell who is in these pictures. There is no way that you can distinguish who this person is. But we were charged. All right, our property is zoned agricultural, not forestry, not residentials as our neighbors. When we built the storage shed on the back of our property, we didn't need a permit. We just needed to turn in a drawing of the shed. We paid the fine and the court costs, and is still being used as a shed. It has no water, no electricity, no septic, no plumbing. Taylors have been cutting our grass on the south side of their parents' property for over 3 years. And this is only because she didn't know where her property lines were. They had their property surveyed 10 days after we were charged with criminal trespass. Let's see here. I think the whole neighborhood dispute started over some area that we had a gentleman come in and doze property. We were gonna put a hog farm in up on the hill. And he went in on Mr. Hall's property by about 20 feet. There was no trees taken down, there's no trees stolen, and we did not doze half of Mr. Hall's property as he states. To answer Mrs. Taylor's question statement about we should know where our property lines are, we did not have the north side of our property surveyed. We just had 13 acres that we sold to Dr. Hearn and his family. I am not sure how this lie got started except out of hatred. When Mike owned 2828 Pond Run Road, he put a piece of PVC pipe in the ground, drilled holes in it so that the garage that is now somehow a bungalow, first floor would not flood. This property is in the flood zone. It is not used for his waste, nor was it a health hazard, as Ms. Taylor stated in the November 9th meeting, and then brought up again in December 14th meeting. I won't even talk about that. My husband's first criminal trespassing charge was brought on by something that I did. I took my side-by-side up on the hill. It got stuck in the mud on New Richmond Development property. I called my husband and said, I got it stuck. I was looking for a dog. He took off. He was just a puppy. He was a little boxer. He took off after a deer. So I called my husband, told him that I got my side-by-side stuck in the mud. And he came up with the Jeep to try to pull it out with the winch. Well, it didn't work. So on the way back to get the tractor to pull it out, we met with someone who worked at New Richmond Development Company. And we explained to him what I did, and he didn't seem to mind, but we went back with the tractor to pull it out. And that's when he snapped a picture of Mike. 2 weeks later, they pressed no criminal trespassing charges on him. So we have had the Army Corps of Engineers, the Building Department, the Zoning Department, Sherrod Brown's office, JD Vance, Ohio EPA, Wintrup's office, all of these offices, all their waste of time. Because the neighbors don't know the law about, I guess, being zoned agricultural and not forestry or residential. I guess the squeakiest wheel gets the most attention. Mr. Freeman, you even stated we just keep falling through the cracks. I don't know how you just fall through the cracks if you're not doing something that you're not supposed to. Well, I did call Chief Brocksterman and told him we surrender. We're throwing in the white flag. We have our house listed for 1.8 million, and it will stay on the market until it sells. I'm hoping that a buyer builds it, tears the house down, and puts in a subdivision so Mr. Cabela's can have his suburban instead of a rural area. And finally, I don't know how a person on this committee can abuse their position of this office as Mr. Cabela's has done. I have a video, body police cam video of Mr. Cabela's stating some very derogatory comments about my husband, even though he doesn't use his name directly, but he is using the position of his office to try to get back at my husband. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Videos are added to the meeting place.
I don't know how we can do the videos, but we'll try to find a way to get them put to the record. You're welcome. Anybody else want to make comment? All right, seeing none, we're gonna move into executive session or other business first, but I don't see any other business. Anybody? So we'll move into executive session. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn into executive session as permitted by the Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1 to consider the employment, dismissal, discipline, or compensation of a public employee.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, and we have a second where I'll be asking for a motion to adjourn into executive session to permit, as permitted by the Ohio Revised Code, section 121.22G8, to discuss confidential information related to economic development and economic development prospect.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, Debbie.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Now, in both of those cases, there is a chance we may come out of executive session and take action. So you're certainly welcome to wait here. There are no refreshments, but you do get the wonderful company of our staff. So we shall return. Ready?
Take action. Oh, second, yes.
No, I already seconded.
Sorry.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so nothing,
You're mine.
we took no action, so we're recommending no action. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, roll call, Debbie. I don't think we need to debate it.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
And Mr. Freeman.
Yes, we are now adjourned. Thank you very much.